All right, guys, welcome back. I am going to dive into a few of your asks today. Actually get to a few of them, amazingly. All right, so here's the first one. Natural Blue 26 asks, in reference to your episode 3 video, not to be a massive effing nerd who reread the original Peter Pan book on Maine as a kid or anything, and I totally am, but they aren't talking about Disney animated versions of Peter Pan and Tinkerbell here, but the original book itself. Shortest version possible in the book, but not in the movie. I won't read through all of this. We've got screenshots here of what happens between Tinkerbell and Peter. I did talk about this, not in my main video, but in the extras one that I did. So number one, entirely possible that the original copy of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan was laying around somewhere when the Grimes kids were growing up. So Daryl got a sideways exposure to it. Heck, as you pointed out, it's around in some way at the prison with Beth. And two, wasn't Daryl very much a lost boy? Not Peter, in my opinion, because he has chosen to grow up where Peter never did. And three, Book Tink very much almost dies and then comes back, and it's tied to belief. Just something to chew on. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for sending this in. And I actually didn't see this before I did my extras video where I talked about Isabelle being Tink. I do think in the sense that she saves Daryl, he's meant to be Peter Pan. But I understand what you're saying about him not wanting to grow up, and Daryl has chosen to grow up. But I also think... I don't know. I mean, we have Carol in Consumed saying you used to be a boy, now you're a man. So especially in the beginning, he was definitely a boy. He was a less mature character. The other thing that I don't actually think that I talked about in my video is that, I did. I talked about how Tink saves Peter by drinking the poison, and then she dies or almost dies, pretty much dies, and then they bring her back, which is a massive resurrection theme. Now, obviously, I don't think that they're going to resurrect Isabelle after she dies, but if Isabelle is a Beth proxy, then we still have a resurrection scene going on here, a resurrection symbolism, I guess I should say, going on here. And like you said, it all is tied back to faith and belief. And honestly, so far, I have not talked that much about faith in conjunction with this season, but there's a huge faith theme going on here. I mean, between Isabelle being a nun and that religious thing going on, and then Losang, I think that I'm going to wait to talk about Losang other than what I've already said, because I have some idea where it's going and I kind of want to wait and see how it all plays out. But Losang is, even though he's not as crazy and as negative as cult leaders, what he said in this last episode almost makes him a cult leader, because he says if it didn't work, if Laurent had been bitten and died, in other words, he wasn't immune, then there's no reason left to live. And so that almost feels like he's about to drink the Kool-Aid or give the Kool-Aid to all of his followers. And so this becomes like a very twisted view of faith. What was once good and could possibly be good is being very, very twisted simply because things didn't go the way they wanted them to go. So we've got kind of a toxic religion going on here. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm kind of going off topic here, but yeah, 100%. I agree with everything you've said here. And the Peter Pan, we've seen it before, but in this episode, I almost felt like the Peter Pan symbolism kind of came out of nowhere because we haven't seen it in a while and just kind of bonked us over the head, but in a really great way. So yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out and for sending this in. I appreciate it. Any thoughts of the symbolism of sticking Carol in front of the Mona Lisa, a painting well known for sending art historians into furious debate over what emotions she's actually projecting for centuries, plus the mystery of who she really is? I don't know that I have any thoughts in particular. I'm sure we could come up with some. I don't go around, I guess that's a stupid thing for me to say. I was going to say I don't go around really analyzing Carol's internal arc, although that's pretty much what I did when I analyzed how Diverged laid out how Beth would return. I was talking very much about Carol's internal arc. I don't know. I don't know that I have anything to say as it relates specifically to her, other than Carol definitely is an enigma at times. But I do think that, so I think it does apply to her character. I mean, not only did Jeanette say this, and then the showrunners at the end during the episode Insider also talked about the fact that the Mona Lisa is hiding something. She's deceptive. She has some secrets. You know, what is she thinking? What is behind that smile? And they talked about that in conjunction with Jeanette, that Jeanette identified with that, and then that's kind of who she became. She became someone who always had something she was hiding. Okay, and I do think that they are very much paralleling Carol and Jeanette here, and I don't mean that in a negative way, like obviously Jeanette is a villain and Carol is not, but it was interesting to see the two of them interacting because they're very similar on a lot of levels, but as I talked about in my video, Carol, if anything, is almost becoming more faith-based than she usually is in the show, more like Beth, but it's specifically because it's in contrast to Jeanette. Usually Carol doesn't need to occupy that role because somebody else does. But here, Jeanette, it's just Carol and Jeanette is so twisted that Carol's going, wait. You know? So in that sense, I do think that it applies to her. But I think the thing that really jumped out at me about this is just that we very much believe that the Mona Lisa and the Louvre symbolism in general is about Beth. And not that Beth herself is deceptive. I don't think like she is the Mona Lisa necessarily, although let me come back to that. But just that the symbolism there could be that there is something hidden, that there is something deceptive about Beth's death, about Coda, you know, what we always say. And I think that it's important that Carol is standing in front of it because Carol is very much a part of that. She was at Grady with Beth. There was something weird going on with how she was injured and the fact that Edwards gave her adrenaline and said that it would ease her blood pressure, which is the exact opposite of what adrenaline does. And once again, I do not believe that that is a mistake on the writer's part. I think they did that purposefully in order to show us that something is off here because they keep medical consultants on staff and they have them to look at injuries and make sure that all of their lingo is correct. So that's not a mistake they would have made, right? So there was something going on there, and that had to do with Carol and what happened to her and how she survived and all of that. So I think that overall, this is a really, really, really rambling way of just saying, I think that it's showing that Carol is part of the symbolism, the whole Mona Lisa, Louvre, Mary Magdalene symbolism, and that is leading to Beth, and that's just important because Carol was part of Beth's arc in season 5. And it goes back to why they needed to wait for Melissa to be able to be available to do this, because that's how they set it up in season 5, and they needed her to be part of it. So that's why they couldn't start it as early as they wanted in season 1 of Daryl Dixon. They had to wait till season 2 when she got here. So that's about all I have to say about that. I said I would go back to Beth being the Mona Lisa. Overall, I don't think Beth, is the Mona Lisa, but do you guys remember, and this has been brought up recently, like within the last few months, I'll have to go find it again and put it on my screen here. Eric Jensen, the guy who plays Dr. Edwards, once posted something that looked like a zombified version of the Mona Lisa and had a bullet wound in her head in the same place that Beth did. So that does kind of suggest that Beth is the Mona Lisa. And I don't think I still don't think it's very literal because he's an actor. He's not one of the writers, but he was definitely hinting that the Mona Lisa and the Louvre symbolism is very much about Beth. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, next one. Sorry, it's a ramble. Am I overthinking this? But Daryl Dixon makes me think a lot about Hershel. Even the tagline, "Hope is not lost," calls back to him, Nebraska. Daryl is in suspenders, and then pocket watch being so important. I would put money on Daryl leaving France with it. As a symbol, he's meant to be with Beth, like Glenn was for Maggie. Aslan talks about working until you fix it, linking to your video about Daryl needing to fix his bike and Diverged. I do think a return to the farm is where he finds her for so many reasons, and I can picture Daryl and Beth making a life there. Their arc together starts there when Daryl denies Lori's request to get Hershel in town because Beth is ill. And the references we see to Glenn and Maggie in Daryl Dixon season 1 through, I assume that's Sophia. And even Carol fits with needing reconnection with Sophia at the farm as her full circle. And lastly, but doesn't Jeanette remind you of the governor in season 2, the torture scene? Bet she has a walker in the closet somewhere. She just might, yeah. No, you've got a lot of good points here. I don't know that I think they're going back to the farm. I mean, that would be great. I would love that. But I think they're more using symbolism and a flashback to bring the farm, like the presence of the farm as a setting into France where they are here. So I don't know that I believe they're necessarily going to go back to the farm to find her, but it is a very potent symbol that they're purposely using here. Now, about you saying that he's a lot like Hershel, that is actually true, and the writers have said that. And I think I didn't entirely internalize it until I was reading other people's theories about the importance of Daryl becoming a father to Laurent. at the very beginning of season 1, the clothes they put him in after Isabelle and the nuns found him and, helped him because his arm was infected and everything, they were the clothes of the priest who had since died. But I remember it was probably in one of the episode Insiders, they said that they actually did use the way that Hershel dressed as an inspiration for how to dress him in that season. And I kind of thought that was interesting, kind of strange, but I was going, okay, so where are they going with that? And they didn't tell us. They just said that they were dressing him like Hershel. Now I think the reason is because he's stepping into a father role. So he has become, to Laurent, a father much like Hershel was. In other words, he's just a really good dad, and Daryl has become the father that he himself and Merle never had. But he looked up to Hershel so much because he was a good father, and Daryl never had that. So I think that that's really important and really interesting, and that is the reason that they're dressing him like that. But yeah, I really like all of your connections here. I hadn't thought of that pocket watch as being a tie to Hershel, but you're right. So I assume you mean the pocket watch that has the picture of the nest on it, and they've shown that so many times. The other thing that I'm thinking of now, interesting, Hershel's watch, which was Glenn's, of course, I guess it was Rick's watch. Maybe it was more Rick's watch than Hershel's watch. Remember that Carol had the watches that she picked up at Terminus and gave back, and that was right before the Grady arc. So that could be another tie. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of mixing things there. But anyway, very interesting though. And yeah, I mean, Jeanette definitely reminds us a lot of the Governor. She reminds us a lot of Dawn, but either one. I mean, they're both villains, right? And she is torturing people, which the Governor did. So yeah, absolutely. And now she's being more like the Governor in the sense too that she, in this last episode, left her compound to go tear down somebody else's compound. We never actually saw Dawn do that. Dawn always stayed in the hospital. But the Governor did. He showed up at the prison more than once to try and kill everybody. So yeah, really great connections there. I like that. Thank you. Let's see. Granny TWD asks, love Beth's return, laid out step by step. Thank you for all the time you spent putting it together. On another note, I shared a day or two ago about an interview in which Norman said his interpretation of the kiss was that it was an experiment. I would like to add a thought regarding said kiss. It was hard not to notice that bright sun shining right in the middle of that kiss. I choose to believe that brings Beth into the scene. Maybe Daryl was thinking about her. Maybe he was wondering if kissing her would have been different. Norman mentioned settling down. I wonder if Daryl was thinking he will have to settle if he's going to settle down. That interview really set this T-Deer at ease. Thanks, Norman. Yeah, I have not gotten to that, and I'm kind of going through these in the wrong order. So let me read your original ask, and then I'll address both of them. Well, Norman just reinforced your thought that there's no reason to be concerned about the kiss. He called it an experiment to answer the question, what is this, and not a response to the feeling of, well, this is it. Thank you. That's a really good way to put it. Considering whether he should have settled down with someone, been a family man and not a fighter, this explains why, in my opinion, he was rather tentative. So yeah, I've talked about this several times over the last few videos, but yeah, he's just, as you said, trying to tell us that it's the gateway into a potential relationship, but not that he's in love with Isabelle. And that, of course, was reinforced as well in the show by the fact that when Isabelle said, I love you, he didn't say it back. Yeah, for sure. I do think the other thing is what I talked about in the extras video that I did, which is just that he doesn't seem to, so there's different there's different ways, of course, different, what's the word I'm looking for? Definitions for the word settle. You can settle down somewhere as in put down roots and build a home. Or the way that you're using it is to settle for someone that is less than what you actually want, right? But he was willing to put down roots and settle down with Beth somewhere. He's not willing to do that with Isabelle. Part of it is the France locale, I'm sure. He still wants to get back to his family. So it's like they almost tried to make us think by what is happening that Daryl has changed his mind about leaving. That's kind of the impression, I think, that everybody had when they all realized there was going to be a kiss between Daryl and Isabelle, that, okay, well, he's changed his mind and now he wants to stay with her. But we do see in the show that is not the case. He's interested in her as in a relationship, but he's still trying to leave. He's still trying to go home. And don't get me wrong, we totally want him to go home and everything, but with Beth, he was willing to stay in the funeral home indefinitely, right? The only reason they left is because the walkers got in, really, and they didn't get very far into their plans for that or anything. But the point is, he was willing to give up looking for the rest of the group, and especially give up looking for Rick, which is a big deal for Daryl, right? And we're not seeing that kind of devotion between him and Isabelle. So yeah, I totally agree. And I love that you mentioned the sunlight. I think that's true too. I think it was a moment of hope, and it does show hope on Daryl's part that he is finally starting to believe that maybe he can be happy. And I think a big part of the reason that he's never really pursued a relationship with anyone, we'll just pin Leah in a corner for right now, is that he really didn't, it really is a self-esteem problem. Like, he doesn't feel like he's worth loving, or that anyone is interested enough in him, or that he has enough to give. And of course, we all know that's utterly ridiculous, but it's how he sees himself. And so I think the sunlight represents, on one level, the hope that he has for actually having a family in the future and having a relationship. And that hope is important. Like, it's what I've talked about before. He needed to cultivate that hope in himself before Beth showed up, before he could really sustain a relationship. But yeah, I do think it brings Beth into the scene as well. This is like, quote unquote, Beth's sunlight, which we always call it. And I like the idea of Daryl thinking of her, which sounds a little twisted, like you should never be thinking about one person while kissing another. That's never very healthy. But it also goes back to what I said in the extras video about how he created this dream, right? The whole, we can watch the sun down by the lake, the fireflies, sleep late, everything he was saying about what their life could be. He's creating that dream, and we believe he is basically telling Isabelle things that he was probably thinking about when it comes to Beth. Like, that's the life he wanted with her, and of course did not get. So he's creating this dream, and that's not bad in and of itself. He knows what he wants, right? But he's also kind of trying to force Isabelle into it, and I don't mean force in like some sort of negative predatory way or anything. He's just saying, okay, well, this is what I want, but I'm going home, so why don't you come with me? And in theory, that could work, but we know that practically it's not going to. And it's just kind of part of the messaging and the theme of the show that it's never going to work out, because he's not in love with Isabelle. And honestly, after seeing everything we've seen, Isabelle told him just before the kiss about the whole de paysan, and how it's like looking at something a new way and a change of scenery. And that made it seem like she had changed her mind and is interested in him now, which on the surface is true. That's why she kissed him. But I don't know. I still feel like she's not in love with him either. Like, the only reason she changed her mind and decided that she wanted to go with him is because everything fell apart at the nest. And Losang was not the great, wonderful spiritual leader that she thought he would be. And so then she was like, okay, what do I do now? That's not quite the same thing as actually being in love with someone and choosing to go with him because you love him and want to go with him. You see what I mean? So it just comes back to the same thing. It's not real, true romantic love. Anyway. So that was like a whole big tangent compared to what you actually asked, but I completely agree, and I love your interpretation of it. So thank you for sending both of those in. Okay, guys, I will call it there for today, but I will be back to answer more of your asks, hopefully tomorrow. Bye.